I am back for part two. If you thought part one was chaotic, part two is going to be probably, for some, the most concerning part. I scoured you through, I found some more articles as well. So, warning, this part could be quite long due to the fact of how much content I will be covering. Essentially, what's happened was, as you saw, the Chinese media was fairly rational and calm. I will link the video on the screen now so you can watch part one. The background will be shown in part one. So there you go. If you want to see the Chinese media responses to it and Chinese media coverage of Solomon Islands, it is there. So let us begin the anarchy, I guess. We have the first one here. This is from Washington Post, sorry. China signed security deal with Solomon Islands, alarming neighbors. From yesterday. Okay, yesterday. Let's honestly, some of these I might just skip over to most part, only focusing on what's necessary. The announcement that follows the leak of the draft of the agreement last month renewed fear from local opposition leaders as well as specific countries, including Australia, New Zealand, and the United States. The deal could lead to Chinese military presence in the islands and increased tensions in the region. Speaking to Parliament on Wednesday, Prime Minister Segele dismissed those concerns and insisted the agreement would beef up the police's ability to respond to crises such as riots in November that killed 4 people and destroyed much of the capital, including Chinese-owned stores. Let me assure the people that we entered into an agreement with China with our eyes wide open, guided by our national interests, said. We have a full understanding of the fragility of peace and our duty as a state to protect all people. Their property is critical and critical national infrastructure. We'll go down. You can read most of this yourself. I'll link them in the description. Concerns are particularly accurate in Australia, which is about 1,000 miles from the Solomon Islands, and which has been target of Chinese trade war, faced with increased assertive Chinese military in the region. Of course, that's missing out a lot of factors, but I'm just focusing on this thing right here, right now. The most strident reaction came down under from Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce. We don't want our little Cuba off our coast, he told reporters. That is not what is good for this nation, not what is good for this region. Prime Minister Scott Morrison, however, rebuffed this question, saying, has made it very clear China would not build its base in Solomon Islands, but Morrison has said agreed the risk of China seeking to interfere within our region. Talking about some other stuff, you can read yourself afterwards, or just look at the video later. Either way, it doesn't matter. On Wednesday, Australian Senator Penny Wong, Shadow Foreign Minister for the opposition party, criticised the Conservative coalition for not doing more to prevent the agreement, which she called the worst failure of Australian foreign policy in the Pacific since the end of World War II. In this announcement, Wang Wenbin, spokesman for China's foreign minister, for China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, sniped at the United States for all of a sudden planning to send junior officials to the region. The deal involved a cooperation of maintenance of social order, humanitarian assistance, and natural disaster response. He said was open and transparent, and inclusive. I'll let you have some basic articles for today. Next one. France 24, 20th of the 4th, 2022. Solomon Islands signed China Security Pact with eyes open despite criticism from US, Australia. The deal announced by Beijing a day earlier has faced sharp criticism from the United States and Australia, which feared a pact would lead to China gaining a military threshold in the South China Sea. But the thing is, this is where I think a lot of these people are dumb, because we have a situation in which Australia and the US wants to make pacts in the South China Sea for pro-US forces. Isn't that a bit hypocritical? But that's neither here nor there. If I was to rant about the hypocrisy of all this, that'd take hours to get this through. Again, to the stuff the other thing said, I'm just trying to pick up anything of relevancy. Okay. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison faced questions about Solomon Island deal on the election trail campaign. Wednesday said he would visit the Pacific Island of 800,000 people at the first opportunity. He rejected criticism that his government has budged the relations with Solomons, and should have sent Foreign Minister Marine Payne to personally lobby against the deal. We treat Pacific neighbors as siblings in family. And our view is that you don't go stomping around telling leaders in the Pacific what they should and shouldn't do. News that China and Solomon Islands had signed the deal broke just days before the senior US National Security Council official Kurt Campbell is due to arrive in the Pacific Island nation for high-level talks. The United States has promised to reopen its embassy in Solomon Islands, which has been closed since 1993. And I think this is actually a good thing which is said at the bottom. The unrest was sparked by opposition to Segove and partly fueled by poverty, unemployment, and inter-island rivalries. That is also correct. But anti-China sentiment also played a role. I think that is a better way. Others have described it much more horribly than that. ABC News, 8 hours ago. China's security pact with Solomon Islands signals a new era in the South Pacific for Australia and its allies. For a nation that officially preaches non-interference, Australia is signing a pact with a small faraway country to supposedly help maintain domestic stability in Solomon Islands. It's a very curious deal. Beijing's public assurances that the agreement isn't aimed at any third country, along with the Solomon Islands Prime Minister's statement that it won't involve a Chinese military base, are little comfort to Australia as the details remain secret. But here's the thing. They are sovereign countries, and they don't. And Solomon Islands isn't a vassal state to Australia, so they don't actually have to give it to Australia. Chinese police and military personnel could be invited to Solomon Islands to protect security, including China's economic interests. Okay. Nothing that important here. You can read this yourself as well later. Non-interference is a general principle, said Shi Yingyong, an international relations analyst at Beijing's Renmin University. but it doesn't preclude China from doing anything if it's at the invitation of local sovereign governments. Solomon Islands is a sovereign nation, but a small, relatively impoverished one that has done a deal with a giant, I guess. Sure, that's one way of saying it. That's fine. Because technically speaking, they are just making a deal. It's not an invasion, and they are sovereign, so that's fine. Talking about PLA stuff, yada yada yada. US dominance has long relied on bases and military access agreements abroad, so it's little surprise that China now appears to be using a similar playbook. But that's not what they're trying to do, though. It's very dubious claims there. They say that the change is being accompanied by increasing official rhetoric about need to protect China's economic and infrastructure interests abroad. In light of the shit that went down, I guess that's fair enough. Jesse Lisco, G7 and have secretive army agreement with Cambodia despite America's effort to persuade Cambodian government against it. But again, America isn't fucking God. People can choose to go against America if they want to and put their own sovereignty first. The Solomon Islands still might be a wake-up call showing us need to understand how fast the region is changing. Well, yeah, the region's changing, but the way this and other things will describe it shows they don't understand. Fuck all. Next. From 19 hours ago, same thing. China's security surprise event to shake up the election campaign from Austin and Albanese. It's going all basically stuff which was mentioned beforehand. Again, finding stuff that's relevant. Basically, this talks about other stuff. It's there if you're interested in it. It links to some election stuff if you're into that. Right, next. 27th of March, 2020. Solomon Islands participants extremely disappointed Australia ignored warnings of China. Deal? Right. The Solomon Islands opposition leader claims he warned Australian officials last year that China was negotiating a military pact, which could see a base established on a strategically located Pacific nation. This is where it gets interesting, doesn't it? Because then this, I guess, for some, can then make a claim in which sovereigns criticize it. So it's criticizing. So this comes down to, yeah, I guess that. But I don't really think it's that. I don't know enough about the opposition there to really comment, so I won't comment on that. But I will keep things relevant. An interview with the ABC, Matthew Whale, who leads the Democratic Party, said he warned Australian officials as early as August that China would likely establish military presence in Solomon Islands. I have intimated as much as possible to the Australian High Commissioner and officials that this was in the offering, and even as far back as last year, all the indications were there, and the Australian government did nothing about it. So I'm extremely disappointed in the Australian government, he said. Now, Mr. Wells is suggesting Australia moves to strengthen its existing bilateral security agreements with Solomon Islands to help kill off China's push for a security pact. We benefit from that treaty with Australia. What does that treaty not able to give us? Maybe that should be a subject of discussion with Australia and New Zealand, as opposed to going with a new treaty already altogether with China. We continue to engage in an open and transparent manner. Sometimes, right, whatever, ignore that. Moving. And this is what's interesting about this one, is that it said where showing foreign aid is not seen as is seen as not effective countering China, as it fucking shouldn't be, because it's horrible. I mean, just the foreign aid Australia puts out in terms of actually genuine care is not actually adequate a lot of the time anyway. Next one. Guardian. The deal that shocked the world. Very dramatic. Very dramatic article. Very dramatic. 20th of April 2022. That one. Sorry about that. Let's come to that one. I can't use that one. Because the Guardian has like a paid and free one. It's really annoying. There we go. Again, these I'm fine just showing the articles. 2020 again. Solomon Islands, China packed its worst failure policy in the Pacific since 1945, Labour says. Background shit. 21 hours ago, Solomon Islands, China deal in Pacific strokes Australian fear. Yep, said that. Let's see if there's anything relevant here. Again, talking about high talks. Scott Morrison, who is currently campaigning for re-election as part of the program of national security, denied the fact was proof that his government has bundled its supremacy with the Pacific Islands, with some islands. He added that he could not have gone around telling leaders in the Pacific what they should and shouldn't do, but Morrison said his country would not have a submissive relationship with China. That's the thing, China never asked for a submissive relationship. It's always Australia thinking China wants a submissive relationship. It's that really weird dynamic going on here. And that's, I think, was part of that. And that, I think, is actually part of the issue, I think. Let's keep going. '20th, 2020. What does US concerned over effects on islands? Like, let's have a look. I read these forms by evil of the US delegation in which White House discussed concern about China as well as reopening embassy. China Foreign Minister said he did not detail where or when the signing took place. I mean, they don't have to, did they? National Security said the federal reporting signing following a pattern of China offering shadowy vague deals with little regional consultation in fishing and now practices. Australia should again. I mean, there's been plenty of that going on in later ones I show. Greg Pauling, an Asia maritime security expert, probably a fake one, but that's neither here nor there. So the US delegation, as with recent Australian delegation that visited, are trying to convince the Solomons government to reverse course if possible, or at least clarify details and plans for implementation. If not, he said. The language leaked was last week. It's quite vague, so there'll be plenty of room to mitigate damage by narrowing it down to be implemented. Separately draft provisions for companies and infrastructure and for Chinese vessels to replenish. Chinese spokesperson Wang dismissed the planned US visit. Deliberate attempts to inflate tension and mobilize rival camps are doomed to fail. Okay, next. Oof, here we go. 3 hours ago, Peter Dutton warns China will expand its presence in the Pacific after the Solomon Islands pact. This is the thing about Peter Dutton. He likes to fearmonger a lot. He likes to think that everything's going to go doom and gloom and everyone's going to fucking die just because a non-US puppet wants to do something. Defense Minister Peter Dutton is warning China will not waste any time expanding its presence in the South Pacific after signing its controversial security pact with Solomon Islands. Let's see. Let's get back to let's get to his comments. Peter Dutton dismissed suggestions for some analysts that China could start to move before the Australian election on May 21st, saying that claims were not based on intelligence. However, he did concede that he expected Beijing to start shifting its focus, citing its recent history. You can expect Chinese to do all they can now that they got disagreements signed. He told Sky News. President Xi looked President Obama in the eye and said 20 points of reclaimed island in South will not be militarized. But this is the thing about 20 points is that then afterwards, the US then military incursions into South China Sea. So it's like, what? You want them to do nothing, and meanwhile you do freedom exercises drills for the sake of it, and it's all very silly. The coalition has fended off accusations from Labour that woefully mismanaged. We've all seen this. However, Mr. Dutton suggested Australia's bargaining position was always going to be weaker than of China. Well, yeah, obviously, because China actually has more that it can help with. Australia can only contribute so much. And then the issue with Australia now wanting to make an issue with China is because that's on Australia wanting issues with China. He avoided especially answering questions on whether he thought Chinese money has been flowing to the Solomon Islands in a bid to clinch the security deal. China operates by very different rules than Australia does. He told Channel 7, we've seen in Africa, we've seen in many countries around the world. Yeah, they operate differently because they offer more genuine help than in some cases. Australia is expected to partner with some islands. We provide support to them. We continue to do so because they are family, but we operate by a different set of rules. Yeah, by essentially slander in a lot of cases. Not exactly a good alternate set of rules. And then here we go. The fear-mongering. United States former ambassador to Solomon Islands said countries such as Australia should have seen China's muscling to the Pacific on the horizon. Catherine Ebert Gray was Washington's envoy between 2016 and 2019. We probably should have been a little more prepared for this type of agreement, she said. We've been aware that China's interested in more defensive activity and partnerships. And they've come around to the Pacific nations. It's probably bound to happen somewhere, but it's interesting that Solomon Islands just 2 years ago recognized Taiwan, and now they end security back to China. Ambassador Albert Gray said it should probably think how countries, including Australia, deal with their Pacific neighbors. We probably need to be more direct. We should probably have stepped up in other ways, not just about security, she said. I think what Prime Minister is looking for is more support, rebuilding his nation, helping his people in remote areas, helping his economy and security. That's exactly what it's about. And to say anything else is to fearmonger. Let's be fucking stupid. And this is where at any foresight said is ruined. Hopefully some islands will be wise enough to balance this relationship. That's what's going to be important that we need to continue to be good partners, continue the way when they need us. It's like, sure, but what you mean by rebalance is to kick out, as we saw before. Okay, Guardian 20th, domestic stuff. Whatever. I can sort that shit out later. I don't know what's doing that. It was fine earlier. Channel 9, 21st, 2022. Let's keep going. When it comes to the issue, go away. I don't want to listen to you now. Basically, you can see this yourself. Okay, let's continue. Minister for Foreign Affairs, Maurice Pace, and John Steinman were deeply disappointed. Our consistently stated view, including from a Pacific Australian national interest, remains that Pacific family is the best place to meet the security needs of the region, but it hasn't. It's clearly shown it hasn't. We are deeply concerned about lack of transparency with Ruyun has been developed. Noting its potential to undermine stability in our region. They welcome statements from the PM that the Solomon Islands will never be used for military bases or military installations of foreign powers. Rightfully so, because that's basically what comes down to again. Let's not be naive here. Earlier this week, US statesperson Ned Price said agreement could destabilize Solomon Islands and set a concerning precedent for the wider Pacific region. Despite the Solomon Islands comment that the border nature of security arrangement leaves open the door for deployment of PRC military forces in Solomon Islands, he said. Micronesia and other specific nations have also expressed concerns about the deal. Meh. In his address, defended a pact saying it was strengthened based on mutual countries' police and help them deal with further future instability, and that is based on mutual respect for sovereignty and the compliance with domestic and international law. Next. more weird articles, but I'm doing it just to show the things. This is why I find it quite funny, is that it's part true, part fearmongering. It may be playing the long game to displace American world order, but it also knows exactly when to strike. No better time when America's greatest southern ally is the constitutional caretaker gray zone of an electoral election. Beijing audacity has embarrassed Scott Morrison and exposed his own recent rhetorical overreach, and his claims of foreign policy supremacy has been tarnished. By inking security pact with Solomon Islands, China furthers two objectives. Firstly, establish the basis in which it can potentially build a Chinese naval base in the future. Second, the agreement is a strategic hit on Australia and the United States, in which taken up to Pacific pivot more than a decade ago under Barack Obama. There we go, a prime contradiction. Apparently it's okay for the US to pivot and try and coerce and convince all the Pacific nations to turn against China, but it's evil when China does any deals. Go. We've seen shit like this in other ones. We've seen commentary about being too soft. Here we go. China's been looking for regional strategic opportunities for years now until they've been largely filled. Australia spent 100 million to fund a expansion of Fiji's Black Rock military camp to outmuscle China from the project in 2018. The same year, Australia convinced Solomon to scrap a 2016 contract with China company Huawei to build an underwater sea highway internet link to the Australian mainland. And the federal government has a hand over increasing touched by the Pacific, the biggest mobile in South Pacific, to prevent the company being bought by Chinese Mobile. We are bound to lose at some point. As Morrison suggested, the pact with Islands was greased with cash and other incentives. But isn't that what you were just doing then by own description? Trying to bribe the people? Next. Al Jazeera. Why is Solomon Islands Security Pact causing alarm? This one is probably a self-read for people, I think. It's still fine, but it says stuff others articles said. And that's the thing I find with all these articles is they repeat a lot of stuff. Okay, here we go. Another thing about what the opposition leader in the island said. All the drivers of instability and insecurity, even those who threaten national unity, Solomon Islands are entirely internal. The Solomon Star, he very quite well by saying on Wednesday, this means the deal is in giving opportunity to military posturing by China has nothing to do with Solomon Islands national security. I doubt that the provision for this deal is adverted, rather it is calculated for geopolitical effect on the part of Prime Minister Seguri. This is mercenary. On the part of China, it is opportunity too good to miss. Talking about China, Taiwan, as they like to do a lot. Nothing strange there. Next. Let's go. News.com.au. Australia must ready Solomon Islands invasion to stop China's security deal. 2022. Australia must be willing to invade Solomon Islands and topple its government if that's what's needed to stop a proposed security pact between China and the Pacific nation going ahead. One commentator argued, and this is really dangerous. Actually, I know I sound like one commentator, but this is really fucking dangerous. This is Australia's Cuban Missile Crisis, and chillingly warns the Chinese naval base in Solomons will be the effective end of our sovereignty and democracy. How? Just how? I'm trying to compare it to 1962 crisis.
Have a look at the news today and say, well,
let's go. Under agreement between shockwaves to Canberra, China would gain a port for less than 2,000 kilometers away from the shoreline. China has parked an enormous stationary aircraft with a certain distance, provocative piece on Friday. There's no way Australia can allow it still to proceed. If it must, the nation should invade and capture Gwadchal such that we engineer a regime change in. There are other soft powers levelers to pull first, and we should pull them forcefully. But we should also merely be amassing ambiguous invasion force at pressure. He added that this was the 14 conditions to end Australian democracy weaponized. This is really fucked up shit. You might think join the line, no matter what it takes, he said. Canberra and Washington simply have to throw politics out and just say, no, this is not happening. I am not a warmonger, but this is the end of the world stuff. This is crazy. That means you're a fucking warmonger. The danger of them taking Taiwan was that it was begun this island jumping, he said. They are desperately fucking the whole lot. It's incredibly bold. It's a huge, whatever. And of course, there's an Aspie thing here. ASPI is Australian Strategic Policy Institute, a US think tank. But not taking it as a statement of intent would be a plain dumb, because it's consistent with the Communist Party's goals and direction, if not in the Solomon Den somewhere else in the Pacific, he said, news.au. So clear analysis engaged in hysteria and the right way to behave here. Mrs. Shoebridge said why it was understandable for South Island to welcome economic and even political competition brought by China. The draft agreement brings something very different, military competition. And it's not interesting for South Pacific populations to have the South Pacific become a place of actual military competition, tension, and conflict, he said. Even if some leaders don't want to act on the fact, other voices have to be listened to. And even notice, every member of the State of the Pacific Island Forum has its direct security tied to this decision. I have no doubt they understand at least what, as well as Canberra does. Within the Solomon Islands, there's no doubt inside the current government itself, there will be some strong voices against this, or any agreement involving Chinese paramilitary or Chinese presence in the Solomons. He said, Chinese job was to speak frankly and show that we are part of a Pacific family, and that we are deeply against the region becoming a place of actual military tension. Yet you want to make places close to China actual military tension. How funny. Okay. Keep going. There's 8, and many ways that can work together, he said. We continue to do what we want. We want peace and stability in the region. We don't want pressure and exertion from China to continue to roll out in the region. We have a fantastic relationship with some islands, and we're not there to request the government of Solomons. And we are there at the request of going on Solomon Islands at the moment. Let's keep going. Earlier, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade said it'd be concerned by any actions of stabilize the security of our region. Pacific Island nations have the right to make sovereign decisions, a spokesperson said in a statement. Australia's cooperation with our Pacific family is focused on the economic prosperity, security, and development of our region. This cooperation is always transparent, open, and aligned to priorities of interest of our Pacific partners. Keep going. Again, yeah, talking about the Wyatt thing. I guess it's what I'm talking about. Next one. Global Times, March 28th, 2022. It's ridiculous on one hand it's ridiculous that Australia on one hand has followed closely the US in condemning what is perceived as Russia's brutal and provoked invasion of Ukraine, but on the other hand, its elites bluntly threatened to invade its neighbor in the South Pacific and foster regime change. A Reuters report on Thursday saying that the proposal for a broader security agreement in China would be sent to some islands cabinet for consideration, to Canberra. Founding publisher of Macro Business and former other leading Asia Pacific affairs channel, The Diplomat, suggested the day after Australia must ready Solomon Island invasion, calling the China-Solomon deal Australia's Cuban Missile Crisis. Smith said, if it must be, the nation Australia should invade and capture regime change, essentially. Australian elites threatened to invade Solomon Islands. Simply the latter hopes to strengthen security cooperation with China. Canberra has carried out much of the military cooperation with the US, including signing the AUKUS deal that will have require nuclear power submarines. Don't Canberra's actions pose a greater threat to China? This shows the moving. I mean, some German points made there. In wanting the the waning of Australian influence in this is because of Australia's hegemonic mindset towards these countries. No country in the region would expect China, which can easily threaten to invade, to help its development. Absolutely. Next. American news, basically talking about something else, just to give some diversity here. Yep, some diversity. Read this one yourself. Yes. Here you go. Macro business, 25th, 2022.
NATO is warning China against supporting Russia's war effort, ending now Russia around sanctions from the West.
Sorry, just because I just started playing for no reason. It's all good. This one talks about Russia, so on. But do we have anyone to defend us? Psycho Morrison is all brand but no balls. Labour will be riven by Chinese allegiances. Both have spent the last 6 months condemning Russian aggression. So is Washington. The press and our woke civil society are obsessed with Russia, even as the CCP occupies our backyard. Well, Psycho, here it is. This is your chance to actually do something real for a chance to drastically turn your election fortunes while you're at it. This is your damper. Only this time for real. Force a direct confrontation with Beijing over summons using any and all means necessary. Get the backing and military support of Washington and drive China out of the South Pacific. The final one for this is this. Come on, hurry up, work. Here we go. March 27th, 2022. Growing calls for Australia for full-scale invasion of some islands to retain Western sphere of influence. This proves the point of China, absolutely, at this point. Amid reports that some islands is one of the world's smallest countries in Australia seeking to establish defences with ties of China, political invasion, and afraid the government has been increasingly widespread. Well, if they fucking do it, that's just imperialism, isn't it? You're overriding a democratic choice. Lyndon Smith stressed that it has to be us and America, indicating that there would be likely a role for United States invasion plans, while Australia and its Western partners maintain excessive military ties with China's neighbors and those of other adversaries such as North Korea and Russia. They have consistently drawn a hard line with China. Statements were hardly isolated and increasingly reflected consensus in Australia regarding the need to consider illegal invasion of neighboring countries, in which was the only way to prevent and forming defensive ties with China. Beyond a military invasion, other measures include influence operations, funding for pro-Western political candidates, and threats of economic warfare are expected to be first used to attempt to coerce oceanic countries and ensure that they form defensive pacts that are with the partners that approved by Canberra should Australia resort to an attack. It would mirror prior US invasions attempt against Cuba and its invasion of Grenada in 1983, which was similar rationales behind them, and were similarly violations of international charters and international law. That is the kind of reporting we have got from the Western end. I hope that was informative for everybody.